Ladies and gentlemen, the journey of the human spirit, especially in the context of personal transformation, is fraught with challenges that test the very foundation of who we believe ourselves to be. When we confront these trials, we face them not as mere obstacles, but as the crucible in which our true character is forged. It is in these moments of immense pressure, where everything seems to be crumbling, that the opportunity for profound change is presented. But there is a pattern, a universal truth that we must all come to terms with. Transformation is not easy. It requires a confrontation with the ego, with the layers of illusion that we have wrapped ourselves in to protect our fragile sense of self. And sometimes it is only at the moment of greatest breakdown that we can truly begin to rebuild. When the foundation cracks, when the world comes crumbling down, we often find ourselves fighting to maintain our image, to protect the facade we have so carefully crafted. But this is the paradox. In our attempts to preserve the very thing that has kept us safe, we imprison ourselves. The very structure we cling to becomes the cage that restricts our growth. The truth, though, is that it is only when that structure is shattered, when we are broken in some sense, that we can experience the profound potential of transformation. We may find ourselves at the end of a road we thought we had control over, standing at the edge of despair, wondering how we got here. In that moment, we realize something deeply unsettling. The beliefs, the patterns, the behaviors we relied on, they no longer serve us. What remains is raw, uncomfortable truth. But that truth is a powerful catalyst for change. The final moment, the breaking point, is often the place where our illusions collapse, leaving us exposed, vulnerable, but also open to something greater. It is the point where we must make the decision to either retreat back into the safe confines of our old self, flawed, fractured, and false, or to embrace the discomfort of transformation, to step into the unknown with courage and humility. And this is where we find the path to something more meaningful, more real. It is here, at this critical juncture, that we must ask ourselves the question: will we allow the suffering of that final moment to crush us, or will we use it as the launch pad for a new beginning? Because it is only when we are broken, truly broken, that we are finally free to rise. And so, in the face of adversity, we must understand this. The ego will crumble, but the spirit, if allowed to breathe, can rise from the ashes of its own destruction. The choice is ours. We must decide to rise or remain in the ruins we've created for ourselves. Confrontation with the ego. Transformation requires confronting the false sense of self and the protective layers we create around our fragile identity. Breaking point as catalyst. True change often happens at the moment of greatest breakdown, where our illusions collapse, leaving us vulnerable but open to growth. The paradox of illusions, the very structures and behaviors we cling to for safety, can become the prison that prevents our personal evolution. Choice in adversity. In moments of suffering and breakdown, we face a critical decision: to retreat back into old patterns or to embrace transformation and growth. Rebirth through suffering. True freedom and renewal come only after we allow ourselves to be broken and rise from the ashes, choosing to embrace the discomfort of change. Transformation is not something that happens easily or on the surface. It is not a gentle evolution, but a profound shift in the very core of who we are, and it begins with a confrontation. This confrontation, however, is not with others or the world around us, but with ourselves. It is an engagement with the false layers of identity that we have so carefully constructed over the years. These layers, often built from defense mechanisms, societal expectations, and the desire to protect our vulnerability, form the very foundation of the ego. The ego, in this sense, is not just a psychological structure. It is a fortress built to shield us from the chaos of reality and the insecurities of the human condition. Yet, This shield, as much as it may provide temporary comfort, ultimately holds us back from becoming who we are truly meant to be. We all carry within us a version of ourselves that is far more complex than the one we present to the world. The version we show is often a carefully curated identity designed to fit into the world's expectations or to protect us from the uncertainty and pain of truly exposing ourselves. It is an identity shaped by past experiences, social conditioning, and a deep, seated need to be accepted. But the truth is that this version of ourselves, our constructed persona, is not real. It is not the authentic self. The authentic self is something deeper, something more raw, vulnerable, and real. And yet, we often confuse these two selves, clinging to the false version of who we think we are, because it feels safer, easier to manage. This attachment to our ego, this resistance to questioning or confronting it, is a fundamental part of the human condition. We are wired to protect ourselves from pain and failure, and as a result, we often create an identity that shields us from the difficult truths we are too afraid to face. It is only when we begin to question this constructed version of ourselves that we start to see the cracks in the facade. These cracks, however, can be terrifying. The idea that the version of ourselves we have worked so hard to protect might not be who we truly are can create immense anxiety and fear. Yet, it is only when we dare to see the limitations of our ego that we open the door to a deeper, more profound transformation. At first, this confrontation with the ego is uncomfortable. It is like waking up from a long, deep sleep and realizing that the world you have built around yourself is not what it seemed. The protective walls you've erected to shield your vulnerabilities no longer feel secure, but stifling. The masks you've worn to present a certain image to others start to feel heavy and burdensome. The very things you believed were protecting you, your pride, your arrogance, your carefully curated persona, are now the things that keep you from moving forward. And it is here, in this discomfort, that the possibility for change exists. The ego, when unchallenged, keeps us stagnant, locked in old patterns, repeating the same mistakes and adhering to the same outdated beliefs. But when we confront it, when we dare to strip away the layers and expose the raw truth beneath, we begin to move toward a new form of being. This new form, however, does not come without pain. The ego does not go quietly. It fights tooth and nail to retain its power, to keep you trapped in a false sense of security. But that fight, uncomfortable as it may be, is a necessary part of the transformation. In this process, we must be willing to let go of what no longer serves us. We must be willing to dismantle the illusion of who we think we are and make space for the unknown. It requires courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to face the uncomfortable truth that much of what we have built about ourselves is based on fear, avoidance, or false assumptions. The ego thrives on certainty, on control, but true transformation can only happen when we embrace uncertainty, when we let go of the need to always have an answer or a solution. This is not easy, and it is not a quick process. It is a gradual stripping away of the false layers we have built up over the years, and as we do so, we begin to encounter the deeper truths of who we are. The confrontation with the ego is a necessary first step toward personal growth. It is only when we face the uncomfortable reality of who we have become through our mistakes, our insecurities, and our defenses that we can begin to shed the parts of ourselves that are no longer helpful. The false self, built on the foundation of fear and defense, must crumble if we are to truly grow. In its place, a more authentic, more grounded version of ourselves can emerge. But this version is not something we can create consciously. It is not something that can be forced or manufactured. It is a discovery, an unfolding of who we are when we are no longer shackled by the need to protect or present ourselves in a certain way. And so, this confrontation with the ego is not a single event, but an ongoing process. It is a continual questioning of who we are and why we do the things we do. It is a willingness to embrace discomfort, uncertainty, and vulnerability in the pursuit of something deeper, something truer. This is the foundation upon which all meaningful change is built. Only when we confront our ego, when we are willing to face the lies we have told ourselves, can we move toward a more authentic, more empowered version of ourselves. It is not an easy journey, but it is the only path that leads to genuine transformation. There is an undeniable truth about human existence. Transformation rarely occurs during moments of ease or comfort. It often comes at the point where we feel most vulnerable, most exposed, and most broken. It is in these moments of crisis, when everything around us seems to be unraveling, that we are forced to confront our deepest fears, our most profound insecurities, and ultimately the limitations of who we believed ourselves to be. These breakdowns, though difficult and painful, are not simply events of failure. They are pivotal turning points, moments where the illusion of who we thought we were starts to dissolve. In these moments, we come face with the very core of our being, and it is at this precise point where transformation has the potential to occur. The experience of a breakdown or a breaking point feels as though the ground beneath us has been pulled away. Everything that we once believed to be stable or secure begins to collapse, and we are left with nothing but uncertainty. In this disorienting space, we may question everything about ourselves, our choices, our past, the identity we have carefully built. The first reaction to this collapse is often one of resistance. We fight the discomfort, hoping for a way to return to what was familiar, to reestablish some sense of control over the chaos that has invaded our lives. But here lies the paradox. It is only when we stop resisting that we begin to embrace the possibility of something new. At this juncture, we are confronted with two potential paths, the path of retreat and the path of growth. The first path, the path of retreat, is often the more tempting one. It is the path of clinging to the remnants of our old self, to the false beliefs and structures that once offered us a sense of identity or purpose. This retreat involves holding on to the familiar, no matter how limiting or damaging it may be. It is an attempt to return to the comfort of what we know, even if that comfort is built on falsehoods or outdated notions of who we are. But while retreat may provide temporary relief, it also ensures that we remain stuck in the same patterns, unable to evolve or move forward. We may patch up the cracks, rebuild the walls, and pretend that everything is fine, but deep down we know that nothing has truly changed. The second path, the path of growth, is far more challenging but infinitely more rewarding. It involves the willingness to surrender the old self, to let go of the identity that no longer serves us, and to embrace the unknown. This is not a path of easy answers or quick fixes. It is a journey of deep introspection, one that requires us to confront our darkest fears and insecurities. It is the path where we acknowledge the cracks in our identity not as weaknesses but as opportunities for change. It is through this breakdown, this destruction of the old self, that we create the space for a new, more authentic version of ourselves to emerge. And while this process is often accompanied by pain and discomfort, it is also filled with immense potential for growth and transformation. The breaking point, then, is not merely a destructive force but a transformative one. It is the moment when the layers of the false self are peeled away, revealing the raw truth beneath. It is in this rawness, this vulnerability, that we begin to uncover the parts of ourselves that have been buried beneath years of defense mechanisms and self-deception. The fear that arises in these moments is not the fear of destruction itself, but the fear of what we might find when we let go of our false sense of identity. It is the fear of stepping into the unknown and of facing the truth of who we really are. But here lies the essence of transformation. It is only by embracing this fear, by moving through it rather than running from it, that we can truly grow. The breaking point forces us to acknowledge that what we have known up until that moment is no longer enough. We have outgrown it, and in doing so, we are required to forge a new path, one that is more in alignment with our true selves. This process is not instantaneous. It takes time, patience, and the willingness to face the discomfort that comes with real change. There are no shortcuts in this journey, no easy fixes. It is a slow and sometimes painful process, but it is through this process that we find ourselves, not as we were, but as we are meant to be. The breakdown is not something to be feared, but rather something to be embraced. It is in this breakdown that we are given the opportunity to rebuild, not from a place of ignorance or illusion, but from a place of truth. We can no longer hide behind the false masks we have worn for so long. The breaking point strips us of these defenses, leaving us exposed but also open to new possibilities. It is here, in this exposed state, that we have the power to choose what comes next. We can choose to rebuild from a place of authenticity, to create a new version of ourselves that is no longer constrained by the limitations of the past. Or we can choose to retreat, to rebuild the walls and continue living within the confines of our old self. Ultimately, the breaking point is not an end but a beginning. It is the moment when the potential for real transformation emerges, when we are no longer defined by the old self, but by the new version that we are capable of becoming. This moment of breakdown is where we find the raw material for growth, where the pain and discomfort of the collapse give birth to something new. And it is only through this destruction and renewal that we can truly evolve into the person we were always meant to be. There is a pervasive illusion that we must hold on tightly to the very things that cause us harm, the things that restrict our growth, simply because they offer us some form of comfort, security, or familiarity. This is a powerful, yet deceptive aspect of the human experience. We are conditioned to believe that holding on to certain beliefs, behaviors, and identities is essential to our survival, even when they no longer serve us or help us grow. The truth, however, is that these very things we cling to, the pride, the sense of control, the structures of our identity, are often the very elements that prevent us from evolving. We imprison ourselves in the safety of these false constructions, and it is this act of holding on to them that keeps us from realizing our full potential. When we are unwilling to question the structures of our identity, we end up reinforcing an illusion that gives us the sense of control, but traps us in cycles of stagnation. The problem lies not in our ability to build an identity, but in the fact that we can become so attached to it that we stop seeing it for what it truly is, a defense mechanism. The ego, the false self, is a construct that we create over time to shield ourselves from the vulnerabilities and uncertainties of life. It's a layer of armor designed to protect us from criticism, rejection, and failure. But this armor, however strong and durable it may seem, is not invincible. Over time, the weight of it becomes unbearable. The more we cling to the need for validation, the more we depend on external approval and control, the more fragile our sense of self becomes. It is within this paradox that we begin to see the truth, the things we believe to be our strength, the pride, the arrogance, the need to always be right, are the very things that hold us back. They are rooted in fear, fear of vulnerability, fear of being exposed for who we truly are. We hide behind these false identities to avoid confronting the uncertainties of life and the inherent imperfections of being human. But the more we protect ourselves from the world, the more we lock ourselves into a cage of our own making. This is where growth stagnates and transformation becomes impossible. The very walls we build to protect ourselves become the very barriers to our potential. This illusion of security through control, the belief that holding tightly to our ego will protect us from harm, is often perpetuated by societal pressures. We live in a world that constantly tells us that we must be confident, competent, and always in control. We are encouraged to project an image of perfection, to present ourselves as flawless, self-assured individuals who have everything figured out. This creates a powerful narrative that we buy into, the narrative that our worth is tied to our ability to maintain control, to hold on to the things that make us feel important, validated, and significant. But the truth is that this pursuit of perfection and control, this obsession with presenting a flawless image to the world, is ultimately futile. The facade we create to fit in, to belong, or to feel superior to others becomes a prison. The harder we hold onto it, the more fragile it becomes. The false self we construct is not built on authenticity or truth. It is built on an illusion, a carefully curated identity designed to meet societal expectations, to shield us from pain, and to protect us from the harshness of reality. But the price of this illusion is high. It is the price of freedom, the price of authenticity. The more we cling to these illusions, the more we lose touch with our true selves, with who we are beneath the armor. When we begin to recognize the limitations of this constructed self, when we start to see the cracks in the facade, we are faced with a choice: to continue to protect and defend the false self, or to let it crumble and allow something more genuine, more real to emerge. Letting go of the false self requires immense courage, because it means surrendering the illusion of control and stepping into the unknown. It means relinquishing the identity that we have worked so hard to create and accepting the discomfort of uncertainty. But in this surrender, in this willingness to face the truth of who we are, lies the possibility for profound growth. The discomfort that arises when the false self is challenged is often the result of fear. The fear of losing our place in the world, the fear of being rejected, or the fear of being seen as flawed and imperfect. But this fear, though powerful, is not an indication that we should hold on tighter to the illusion. In fact, it is a signal that we are on the verge of something deeper, something more transformative. It is in these moments of discomfort, when we feel the fragility of our constructed self, that we are given the opportunity to step into something more authentic, more vulnerable, and ultimately more powerful. The process of shedding the layers of the false self is not instantaneous, nor is it easy. It requires time, patience, and an unwavering commitment to truth. It means embracing the discomfort of not knowing who we are or where we are going. It means being willing to face the parts of ourselves that we have long avoided, the parts that we have hidden behind the walls of our constructed identity. But it is only through this process of dismantling the false self that we can come to know the true self beneath, the self that is not defined by societal expectations, external validation, or the need for control. The false self may offer us a temporary sense of security, but it is only when we let go of this illusion that we can step into the fullness of who we are meant to be. The false constructs we create to protect ourselves are ultimately limiting and suffocating, and it is only by releasing them that we can begin to experience true freedom, authenticity, and growth. When we finally allow ourselves to let go of the illusion of control, we make space for the emergence of the true self, the self that is grounded in truth, vulnerability, and a deep connection to the world around us. In life, there are moments of immense struggle, moments when we are pushed to the very edge of what we believe we can endure. In these times, we are confronted with the most basic choice of all: to retreat into the familiar, to shrink away from the discomfort, or to move forward, embracing the challenge and allowing it to shape us. This decision is not an easy one. It often requires an immense amount of courage to choose the path of growth, as it demands that we confront the uncertainties and fears that lie within. The natural inclination, especially when faced with adversity, is to protect ourselves, to retreat back into the safe confines of what we know. This path, while it may provide temporary relief, ultimately keeps us stagnant and prevents us from realizing our true potential. The decision to step forward into discomfort, however, is the one that opens the door to transformation. The choice to move forward in the face of adversity is not simply a matter of willpower or blind optimism. It is a conscious decision to embrace vulnerability, to face the unknown with the understanding that the process of growth is rarely linear and is almost always uncomfortable. This decision to move through discomfort requires us to let go of the illusions we have built about our identity and our place in the world. It asks us to step away from the safety of our old habits, beliefs, and coping mechanisms. But, as difficult as it may seem, this is where true change occurs. It is in the moments of greatest discomfort, when we feel most out of control, that we are presented with the opportunity to redefine ourselves, to move beyond the limitations of our past. When we choose to embrace the discomfort and the uncertainty of growth, we are choosing to confront the very aspects of ourselves that we have long avoided. This process is not about seeking out pain or suffering for its own sake. It is about understanding that pain and discomfort are not inherently negative experiences, but rather essential components of the transformative process. We are often afraid of the unknown because we have become so accustomed to the comfort of the familiar. We rely on the things we know, the patterns that have kept us feeling secure, but the truth is that these patterns, while they may provide us with a sense of stability, are not the pathways to personal growth. The familiar keeps us stuck in cycles that ultimately do not serve us. When we are faced with a breaking point, when everything seems to be falling apart, we must realize that this is precisely the moment that offers the greatest potential for transformation. At this moment, the world as we knew it begins to shift, and the old ways of being that we relied on are no longer enough. We are forced to confront the possibility that the self we have known is not the self we are meant to be. This confrontation with our old identity can be frightening, but it is also incredibly liberating. It forces us to question everything we have believed about ourselves, about our place in the world, and about our capabilities. It is through this questioning that we are able to strip away the false layers that we have built up over time. The discomfort that arises in these moments is not something to fear. It is an invitation to grow, to evolve, to become something more than we were before. We must understand that, in the face of adversity, there is a choice to be made. The choice is whether to turn away from the discomfort and retreat into what is familiar, or to move forward, embracing the uncertainty and allowing the challenge to shape us. This choice requires courage because it involves stepping into the unknown, into a space where we do not have all the answers, where we are not in control. It is in this space of vulnerability, where we have no choice but to surrender our need for certainty, that we truly begin to grow. Growth, by its very nature, is uncomfortable. It requires us to stretch beyond the limits of what we have known, to challenge our assumptions, and to face the parts of ourselves that we have long avoided. In these moments of discomfort, we are not simply learning new things. We are reshaping our very understanding of who we are. The old patterns, the old ways of thinking, begin to crumble, and we are left with the opportunity to build something new from the ground up. This process is messy, it is difficult, and it often feels like we are walking through the unknown. But it is only by walking through this discomfort that we can reach the other side, where the potential for a more authentic, more empowered version of ourselves awaits. In times of challenge, it is easy to become fixated on the difficulty of the situation, to see only the obstacles and the pain. But what we must understand is that these very challenges are not roadblocks. They are stepping stones. They are the tests that force us to grow, to stretch beyond what we thought was possible. The discomfort that arises in these moments is not something that should push us into retreat. It should push us forward into action. It should encourage us to embrace the discomfort, to lean into it, and to allow it to transform us. The decision to move through discomfort, to embrace the uncertainty of the unknown, is the decision that leads to growth, to self-realization, and to a life that is truly meaningful. Ultimately, the choice to step into the discomfort of growth is the choice to take control of our own transformation. It is the choice to acknowledge that the person we are today is not the person we must remain. We are capable of evolving, capable of becoming something more than what we have been. The discomfort we experience in these moments of growth is not an obstacle to our success, but a necessary part of the process. It is the fire that forges the strength within us, the challenge that refines our character, and the catalyst that propels us toward the person we are meant to become. By choosing to face the discomfort head on, we take control of our own destiny, and in doing so, we unlock the limitless potential that resides within us. When we find ourselves at the crossroads of transformation, there is an inevitable truth that surfaces. Change cannot happen without a willingness to be vulnerable. We must be willing to face not only the world around us, but also the raw, unfiltered aspects of our own nature. This confrontation with our vulnerabilities, the very things that we often seek to hide, deny, or protect ourselves from, is what enables us to break free from the chains that bind us. Vulnerability is the gateway to growth, to the unraveling of the false self, and to the emergence of something truer, something more authentic. Yet it is precisely in the face of vulnerability that we are most afraid to act, for it means confronting the uncertainty that we so often try to control. The idea of exposing our weaknesses, our fears, and our insecurities feels threatening, even dangerous. But it is in allowing ourselves to be vulnerable that we experience the possibility of true liberation. The reason vulnerability is so difficult to embrace is because it asks us to let go of control. We are constantly striving to manage and regulate our experiences in the world. We want to ensure that we present a version of ourselves that is strong, capable, and unflinching. This desire for control often manifests in the ways we present ourselves to others. Through our pride, our defensiveness, our insistence on being right, and our unwillingness to admit weakness. We construct these facades to protect ourselves, to shield us from the judgment or the potential rejection of others. Yet, behind these facades, behind this armor of control, lies the truth of who we really are: human beings with imperfections, fears, and deep-seated vulnerabilities. The irony is that in our attempt to shield ourselves from being vulnerable, we inadvertently create a prison. This prison is made up of the walls we build around our emotions, our thoughts, and our true selves. The more we refuse to acknowledge our vulnerability, the more these walls grow, the more tightly they enclose us, and the less we are able to experience the fullness of life. We become trapped in a cycle of self-deception, hiding behind our image of invulnerability. This cycle of denial prevents us from truly connecting with others, from experiencing the depth of our emotions, and, most importantly, from experiencing real growth. The act of embracing vulnerability does not mean we are weak or incapable. It means that we are strong enough to acknowledge our humanity. It is a recognition that we do not have to be perfect to be worthy. Vulnerability is the bridge between where we are and where we need to go. It is the moment when we let down our guard, when we stop pretending, and when we open ourselves up to the possibility of change. This act of opening ourselves up is frightening because it removes the comfort of the familiar, the safety of our constructed identities. It exposes us to the risk of failure, rejection, and disappointment, but it is in this very exposure, this rawness, that we find the opportunity for true transformation. When we face our vulnerabilities head on, we begin to understand that they do not define us. They are simply part of our experience. The vulnerability that we fear is not an indicator of our worth but a natural part of being human. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give ourselves permission to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to learn from them. We give ourselves permission to grow. It is through these moments of exposure, where we confront our deepest fears, that we begin to shed the layers of our false identity, the parts of ourselves that we hide behind to maintain a sense of control or protection. And it is only by shedding these layers that we can become more of who we truly are, stepping into a version of ourselves that is more authentic, more aligned with our true nature. But vulnerability also invites connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create the space for others to do the same. In a world that often values strength, independence, and the appearance of invulnerability, there is something profoundly human about showing our weaknesses, sharing our struggles, and admitting that we do not have all the answers. Vulnerability creates empathy, understanding, and a sense of shared humanity. It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level because it speaks to the truth that we are all flawed. We are all struggling in one way or another. By embracing our vulnerabilities, we invite others to do the same, and in this shared experience, we build stronger, more meaningful relationships. At its core, vulnerability is the courage to be seen as we truly are. It is an act of self-acceptance and self-compassion. It is the understanding that we do not have to be perfect to be deserving of love, respect, or success. By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we stop hiding from the world and begin to engage with it in a more authentic and genuine way. This is not a passive acceptance of weakness, but an active choice to live more fully, to embrace all aspects of who we are, both the strengths and the imperfections. True transformation requires that we accept ourselves, not in spite of our vulnerabilities, but because of them. Our vulnerabilities are not our enemies, they are the keys to our growth. They show us where we need to heal, where we need to grow, and where we need to embrace the fullness of our being. Vulnerability is not about weakness. It is about embracing our full humanity and acknowledging that we are all works in progress. It is through this acceptance of vulnerability that we can begin to unlock our true potential and step into the person we are truly meant to be. In vulnerability, there is strength. Strength that comes from being honest with ourselves, from being willing to show up in the world as we are, without pretense or defense. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we allow ourselves to grow, to connect, and to ultimately transform. In the end, we must remember that it is not the armor we wear, nor the facades we construct, that define us. It is the raw, unvarnished truth of who we are beneath it all, the vulnerabilities, the imperfections, the struggles, that shape our real strength. Life will always present challenges, and the world will constantly test our resolve. But it is in these moments of discomfort, in the moments where we face the breaking points, that the true transformation begins. We are not defined by our failures, our missteps, or the struggles we face. Rather, we are defined by our capacity to rise, to confront our vulnerabilities head on, to surrender the need for control, and to embrace the uncertainty of the unknown. The courage to be vulnerable, to be real, and to face life without the mask of perfection is what allows us to grow and evolve. As we navigate this journey, let us remember, true growth comes not from holding on to what is familiar and comfortable, but from letting go and embracing the discomfort of becoming who we are truly meant to be. Only then, when we allow ourselves to be fully seen, flaws and all, do we unlock the door to a life of authenticity, purpose, and endless possibility. The moment that seems like it will break us is the very moment that offers the opportunity to rebuild ourselves into something greater. Let us move forward unafraid, unashamed, and ready to face whatever challenges life brings, knowing that it is through our vulnerabilities that we find our greatest strength.